When I arrived at the crime scene, I noticed a series of letters scratched on the floor. Rachel. In German, this translates to revenge. I began examining the victim closely. The woman was well dressed, with all her jewelry carefully maintained except for her wedding ring, which looked unusually dirty. However, the inside of the band was smooth and shiny, indicating she frequently removed it. Given her appearance, she clearly wasn't someone who worked with her hands. That left only one explanation for taking off the ring. She was unhappy in her marriage and having an affair. I quickly laid out my analysis for the police. The victim was a journalist, and her clothes showed signs of being caught in the rain. Since it hadn't rained in London that morning, she must have just arrived from Cardiff and planned to stay overnight in the city. Her suitcase would tell the whole story. However, no suitcase was found at the scene, which meant someone had taken it. This discovery only fueled my excitement. I rushed out immediately to hunt for clues. Watson had no choice but to head back to the apartment alone, only to find I'd already beaten him there and I'd brought back that pink suitcase with me. He couldn't believe how I'd managed it. The breakthrough actually came from the color pink. The victim was clearly a pink lady. Her lipstick, clothes, and shoes were all pink, so naturally her suitcase would be too. But a killer carrying a bright pink suitcase would stand out way too much and would most likely ditch it somewhere. I found it in an alley near the crime scene. Unfortunately, the victim's phone wasn't inside. The killer must have kept it. Now it was Watson's turn to step up. I had him send a text to the killer. I was certain that if the killer was clever and arrogant enough, he wouldn't be able to resist showing up after reading the message. Sure enough, shortly after the text was sent, the killer called back. Following the instructions, we headed to the meeting spot and staked out from a restaurant across the street. The restaurant owner mistook us for a couple and thoughtfully placed a candle on our table. Watson clearly got the wrong idea, and things got a little awkward. That's when I spotted a taxi. I bolted after it immediately, and Watson followed right behind, completely forgetting the cane he'd been relying on this whole time. I pulled up a mental map of London and plotted the fastest route. We sprinted through the streets and finally caught up with the cab, but the passenger inside looked completely clueless and said it was his first time in London, definitely not our killer. Even though we didn't catch the murderer, we were still riding the high from that chase. It wasn't until the restaurant owner returned with the cane that Watson realized he wasn't limping anymore. Just like that, practically a medical miracle. Meanwhile, the police brought new information. The victim had a daughter named Rachel, but here's the strange part. The daughter had died years ago. As a clever woman juggling multiple men in her life, I couldn't understand why she would scratch her daughter's name into the floor as she was dying. I was lost in thought when the landlady kept interrupting.
A taxi!
Mrs. Hudson!
Wait, a cab? Why hadn't I found the killer earlier? Could he have blended into some crowd, and what kind of crowd would make people completely let their guard down? Of course, a cab driver. It finally clicked. The killer was right downstairs.